Hey, everybody, welcome to the Intentional Father podcast. We are very fortunate to have Jeffrey Shears with us today as our guest. And we've already been talking a little bit prior to hitting the record button, but here we are, and I'm excited for everyone to hear what he's going to be bringing to the table. And so with that, Jeffrey, why don't you give us a little bit background information on who you are personally as a father, and then what you're even doing professionally in the fatherhood realm, and then we'll jump in from there.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, the opportunity to share my fathering experience and kind of what I do professionally also. So I am a dad. So I just didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night, right? I am a father of 3 daughters. So I'm a girl dad. Jara, Jada, and Jordan. The oldest is 30. I'm a new grandfather, Joy. So the J's run deep in our family. But yeah, I'm also part of a blended family. When I married my wife Danielle, I met Danielle when Jordan was 4. We got married when Jordan was 5, and subsequently had 2 more, Jara and Jada. And so they're all young adults, and got involved with fatherhood as a graduate student at the University of Denver. I go to a PhD program to get my PhD in social work, looking at overrepresentation of African American males in the juvenile justice system. That was my area of research and what I was focused on. I got pulled into Early Head Start Research Evaluation Project, looking at fatherhood. And so a quick shift there, start studying fathers, and really found my niche. I'm currently the director of the Moynihan Institute for Fatherhood Research and Policy out of Atlanta, Georgia, which is a think tank looking at fathers and fathering issues. And so my area of expertise is fathers' influence on early infant development and fathering, generational fathering, which I hope we get to talk about today, is how do we learn how to father, and what is our legacy as fathers? So that's me in a nutshell. So super excited. Anytime I can talk about fathering and its impact on children and families and communities, happy to be here.
All right, thank you. Well, let's jump into that generational fathering dynamic. What is that, and what do we need to know about it?
Oh, sure. So it's a term called intergenerational fathering, that we learn how to father from our fathers. And generally, when men have an engaged, active father in their lives, they're much more likely to be an engaged, active father. So we talk about men either emulate or compensate for their own fathering experience. And the important part of generational fathering is that what we do as fathers is impactful to the next generation and even to the generation after that. As a believer, I certainly believe that the whole generational impact of fathering, we see multiple stories of that biblically in the Bible, that those have generational impacts. And so one example I like to use is that as a father, we think of what we're doing now in the present in our fathering activities and interactions with our children. But new research has shown that as a father, we're responsible for our son-in-law's marital satisfaction. I'll let that marinate a little bit.
Mm.
As a father raising daughters, you're responsible for your son-in-law's marital satisfaction, because we show when daughters have a positive, emotionally engaged, active relationship with her father, her husband, when she reports that, historically, her husband shows higher marital satisfaction. So when we think about fathering, we really need to think about our generational impact in regards to fathering. We also know that, again, I'm a girl dad, so a little bit biased, that how we treat our daughter's mother has impact on our daughters, right? Because she internalizes how she treats her mother, which influences her in regards to who she's involved with romantically later. And so when we think about fathering, we really, again, think about, what am I doing now that's going to impact my children, my grandchildren, my great grandchildren. And then we also need to begin to think a little bit about how did I get here, right? For those who come from communities where there were not involved fathers, or for families where there were not involved fathers, we got to think about, okay, so how do men learn how to father? So that's part of generational fathering too. So how do men learn how to father? So we learn how to father first from our fathers. And if that wasn't there, then from our families of origin. And then it gets kind of dicey after that, because now our influence on fathering is peers and then media, And so we think about guys who didn't have a great relationship with their father or absent father. And we know there are communities and families where there aren't fathers around, communities and families. So where do these men learn how to father? Because we know, generally speaking, men aren't going to ask, right? We are vision. We see modeling. We see behaviors that we model. We're like, okay, I want to adopt that or whatever. But if you come from communities where that was not present or existent, then highly unlikely we're going to grab a book or whatever, to learn how to fathering. So we have to also understand potentially our own fathering deficits, because we didn't have good models coming up. And so that's in a nutshell is what generational fathering is. Both how do we father to the next generation, and then how do we learn about fathering from our, again, families of origin, our communities, our upbringing.
Okay, let me ask a real specific question before we move on. But what would you say to a father who may be skeptical of the idea of learning how to father? That as men, we're very prideful. It's hard for us to admit we got something to learn, or we could improve somewhere, especially with fatherhood. It's so personal,
Right.
to even suggest, hey, maybe you should try a different approach. Maybe you could improve as a father. If just a suggestion is almost insulting, a lot of people kind of get insulted by that. So what would you say to someone who may be listening, but they're like, how dare someone suggest that who I am or what I'm doing isn't the best, or it could be improved on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think we can all learn. We can all get better at our craft. And I love the intentional father, because I always say father on purpose. And I think it's a part of self-reflecting. Where did you learn how to father? So you are most likely emulating or imitating something that you saw. Like, there's no manual there. Well, there are manuals, but we probably didn't go. I mean, it's just like relationships. Where did you learn how marriage works, right? And so with we can all improve on fathering and think about it differently. Think about it in a more holistic viewpoint, particularly given that, maybe what I think about fathering is being a provider, because I saw my dad work 60, 70 hours a week. Maybe that's not best, because we that's what society tells us, that we need to provide. As long as we're seeing, and we talk about blended families, or men who may not have custody of their children full time. And we think, well, as long as I'm sending a check, society tells us, as long as we're sending a check to the other side of town, paying child support, we're doing fine. But that's not where the benefits of fathers lie, right? The benefits of fathers are because of the time you spend with your child. I often think about my own upbringing, that I'm sure my grandfather bought me things and bought me trinkets and stuff like that. But what I really remember my grandfather was running errands with him in his red pickup truck, and him telling me, hey, come on, let's go here. That's what I remember. Again, I'm sure he bought me stuff. And so I think men get locked into this provide. But the iPhones and the Jordans and all those things are going to pass away. And what's going to be left are the memories that you share with your children. And so I'm always encouraging men, hey, you working 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week because you're trying to provide. It may be more beneficial if you pull back on the hours you work and spend that time with your children, because that's what's going to be most valuable.
It's a good message. What is the Institute showing us as far as latest research? What do fathers need to be aware of? Are there any trends?
Oh, sure. So we just did a study looking at non-residential fathers. So we know there's a ton of blended families and a ton of, they're on the rise, out of wedlock births, all those things that are happening to decimate traditional families. And so one thing that the Institute we're looking at is we've just released a study looking at how men in low-income communities feel in regards to being a father with lack of resources. So we know there's a lack of resources in social services, community resources. Just the takeaway is we have a cadre of men who want to be good fathers. They want to do the right thing, except they don't have any resources in the community. They don't have a place where they can go to support them as a father. So we have these young men who have children. They're not residing, but they want to be there. They don't know what being there in a positive, healthy way really looks like, but they want to, but there are no services. So there's a lack of services. And so we're just encouraging both healthcare, mental health, social services, those agencies that supposedly deal with family, but really kind of deal with mom and children, at least historically, to begin to provide those social supports, educational supports, and how to be a father, because these men want to be good fathers, but they don't have any supports to help them be the father that they want to be.
Okay. As get a little personal now, as you reflect over, you're raising 3 daughters, you've successfully got them through childhood. So now I'm sure there's a whole other conversation we can have about parenting adult children. But when you think of the childhood years, what was one of your best wins or best moves as a dad? Anything you look back and go, man, I wasn't perfect, but I did that one right. And that could be a principle, or that could be like a one-time moment.
Yeah. So personally, just again, want to piggyback on intentional father. So I started doing this work right before I got married. I have a great relationship with my father. 3 generations. My grandfather raised my dad. My dad raised me. I raised so we have strong family ties, strong father presence. So just blessed to have come out of that environment. And I just think of my neighborhood, seeing really strong fathers in my community. So I had that background. And so I had a good platform or a good foundation on fathering, and once I started getting the literature and studying and working with fathers in Denver and working on research studies, I actually started writing research papers on fathers. I actually gleaned a little bit more about why these things happen and the benefits and unique contributions of fathers. And so I went into parenthood really intentional. Okay. I remember writing my dissertation, and my 6-month-old sitting on my lap while I'm editing my dissertation, talking to her about fathering stuff, and so just really being intentional, really fathering on purpose, being there for events, making sure that, again, my area of expertise is father's influence on early infant development. So all the developmental stuff that I know are important for fathers. And so, within 2 newborns, my wife breastfed. And so there's really no need for me to get up at night, right? There's no need. It's nothing for me to do in the middle of the night when they start crying. But because I got into the literature and understood father's unique contributions to children's development, I got up at night and changed their diaper and consoled them, because I wanted them to know that, even as a newborn baby, that when they were stressed and they were crying and upset or whatever, that their father would rescue them. I wanted that type of bond. And so, I would change their diaper, then take them to mom for breastfeeding in the middle of the night. So just those little things, because I was, again, just trying to be intentional as a dad. And as they grew, just being, we talk about fathers being there, and just really intentionally being there for not just events, but, doing homework, or my girls kind of talk about it now. We do nachos in middle school, nacho nights on Tuesday, and it's like Now we figured out why you sit down and ask all these questions on Nacho Nights twos, and now they're adults and then they reflect like we used to love that, get around, talk to you about what was going on in school and this, that, and the other, what was going on with our friends. You just keeping tabs on us. I was like, yeah, because I knew at teenagers if I pushed back on who you was hanging around or whatever, you was going to grasp them more. But that was my way of like, okay, yeah, in my mind, like I don't want them hanging around that person, whatever. But just kind of monitoring them or what have you. So, and I could think of many other examples, but just really being intentional, really thinking of. I think if as men, if we think about our legacy as fathers, what do we really leave, right? And I think if we sit down and think about our legacy as what is being a dad, what are we really leaving, then it becomes a little easier to think about those things that we did because we're being intentional, right? We're being purposeful as a father. And so we purposeful as a father, all the other things in life that tends to pull us here and there become less important, right? Because we're purposeful in our fathering, because we're generally fathering the next generation and having impact on subsequent generations, right? What is your patriarchal lineage to your family? I don't think a lot of men think about that.
Yeah. Well, even earlier you mentioned just coming from a couple generations of present fathers. I haven't even thought about that. Like I know, like I don't know if my grandparents were raised like what that family unit was like. I know how my parents were raised and what family they come from, but yeah, it's interesting to look back. How far those generations go, and
right.
I love the practical part of dad's role when babies are, just the newborn phase.
Right.
So man, such a good opportunity to bond with the child, help mom out a little bit, be supportive of her doing the diaper duty at night.
Yeah.
So.
And I'd like to add something to that too, just to help men understand, because a lot of times we don't know. Like I talk to men, I talk to people who work with family, they still don't understand the unique contributions that fathers make. So fathering isn't mothering. They're two totally different dynamics. So I always encourage men to father in your natural, the way God intended us to parent, and thankfully, my wife grew up in a two-parent household with her dad, and so it was never this thing of you got to hold a baby this way or you got to do this. And of course, I grew up in a house of daughters, and I did everything except for hair. My wife had to go out of town or whatever. I was like, you need to do these babies hair before you leave. But giving baths and cooking and changing diaper, like all that, I was fully in. But I don't think men realize. So we know women have hormonal changes during pregnancy. Men tend to have hormonal changes once the baby gets here. And so we think about non-residential fathers, and that happens when that child cries. That's when that hormone kicks in, that protective hormone. And so, with all the blended families and, non-residential dads, they're missing out on that when they don't hear their newborn cry. That's when that hormone for us kind of kicks in. And so, another example I love to use because it resonates with most men is how we interact with our infants, right? Women, research shows women are much more likely to be into cognitive play with their, 2-year-olds or, their 14, 15-month-olds up to 2, like much more cognitive play, patty cake, singing songs, or whatever. We also know that fathers are into more rough and tumble play. So, you just imagine a child sitting quietly on the floor or playing with toys on a blanket, and dad comes in. He's going to pick the child up, start a rough housing, rough and tumble play, tossing the child in the air, what have you. Well, we know that children rarely experience this with their mothers, okay? Because moms are more in the cognitive play. So that child's activity level is flat when dad comes into the room. Dad picks the child up, but in the rough house, activity level suddenly spikes. Dad plays with that child for a couple of minutes and set the child back down and goes on about his business. So that child's activity level is here, it suddenly goes here, and it suddenly drops, okay? Children don't experience that with their mothers. And their whole rough and tumble play is highly correlated with self-regulation, young children's ability to control their emotions. we know self-regulation is highly correlated with school readiness. And so we look at, for example, we look at the Black community where like 60 some percent of Black kids are raised in a single parent household without fathers in the home, where they don't get access to that very much. And we think of the studies that show that little Black boys don't really adjust to school to third grade. Well, we can walk that back to what's because they don't have high levels of self-regulation. They don't have school readiness. And what prefaces school readiness is self-regulation, and they don't have self-regulation because they grew up in a household without a father.
Wow.
And so we begin to put the pieces and tie the pieces together like that. Then that negates the attitude that we have in society that fathers are a paycheck and fathers are providers. No, there are unique contributions that fathers make to children. Fathering is not mothering. They're two different paradigms.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge. And so you'd say to all the moms watching, just take it easy on the dad when they want to roughhouse a little bit. Let them do their thing.
Yeah, no, children need that. And then, I'm glad you said that, because part of this intervention of including and encouraging fathers is having this conversation with mothers, right? Because you have mothers who come out of households and without a father, and they don't really understand, like, hey, I'm fine, I don't have a dad or whatever. But mothers need to also be a part of this conversation, in that, just personally, my wife never badgered me because those girls, they had those stripes and plaids going to school. Like, so I'm like, go pick your own outfit out, in kindergarten, what you want to wear? Like, okay, yeah, that's fine. My wife, she would probably never let those babies wear that to school. You might say something like, did they wear that to school? Like, yeah.
Oh man, I think every dad's been there.
I'm like, yeah, it looked fine. That's fine,
Yeah.
But it wasn't, she might chuckle and she, might say, well, I wouldn't let her wear that, but okay. But, she supported me in, let me do my thing as a dad, because she knew that, kids need both. They need both influences. So
they do. Okay, we got on a really good tangent there, but let me ask a converse question to the first one. Have there been any times where you've just dropped the ball as a dad, where you think, man, that one wasn't a good decision, or I failed there? Audience, learn from my mistake. Don't do this. Any personal, like, hey, let me be the failure and everyone else learn from it, and don't do it.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm coming from. I preface this. I'm coming from a supportive household and supportive wife. So I do remember this sits vividly in my head. I've been gone all day doing stuff, and I come home. I actually been out of town, and I come home. I walk in the door, and I already had in my mind, we do this, guys. Like, man, when I get home, I want to lay on the sofa and let the TV watch me. I've been gone all day. Got up early in the morning, left, and have been gone. And so I come in the house, and I hear the girls running to the front door. Daddy's home. Daddy's home. They come dressed, and we going to the fair. And I was like, no, I'm tired. Whatever. And they was dressed, ready to go. It was in the evening, and my wife's like, hey, can I talk to you? Now, she heard me tell them, like, no, we're not going. I'm tired. We're going to sit down. And she's like, can I talk to you for a second? And I'm like, sure. And she's like, your baby's been waiting all day for you to get home to take them to the fair. Like, don't disappoint them, and don't, because you're out chasing your dream or your avocation or whatever, your baby's been waiting all day. Mm. And I was literally tired. I've been going all day, been outside all day. And so that was kind of an almost failure. I was like, okay. All right, I came by, hey, girls, get your stuff on, let's go. And we really had a wonderful time, but it helped me to come out of what I had planned, because we have to be flexible when that's that purposeful fathering. And on a more personal note, I guess a failure that I've had um, and I had a recent experience in praying for your children, and not praying for them because I've always prayed for them. And I prayed with them when they were younger, but I guess about teenage years and when they started to go off to college and when they became adults, I stopped praying with them and you know, um, stopped doing that. And that's a regret that I have, um, because I understand how important it is for fathers to put their hands on you and pray for you and affirm you and all those things. And I recently asked my father to do that for me just a couple weeks ago, and it was powerful.
Wow.
And again, kind of we emulate, right?
Uh-huh.
My dad and I had the same conversation, like, well, 'cause I asked, I said, Dad, I would really love for you to lay your hands on me and pray for me. And we had never talked about this or anything. And it's funny that he literally was like, well, I used to pray for you, my brother, and I used to pray for you guys all the time. I say, I remember as a kid, you would touch us and pray for us. And I said, but I don't remember it happening as teenagers and certainly as an adult, as a grown man, marriage, like all, these other times. And he was like, no, I haven't. I was like, so Dad, I would like for you to. And I modeled that. I modeled the same thing he did, praying for little, third, probably stopped maybe fourth, fifth grade as preteens. I stopped praying for them, right? I mean, I stopped praying with them. I was always praying for them. I kind of stopped praying with them. And I just thought, like, I look back, like, if that means so much to me at my age as a grandfather to have my father pray for me, I dropped the ball that I'm sure it means just as much for my adult daughters to pray with them now, even though they're doing their own thing, they're adults. And so I just encourage your audience, like, hey, it's a powerful thing, man, to speak life into your children, to pray with them, to pray over their life. Yeah, even as adults. So it's something that I'm starting to do again with my daughters.
Wow.
So that's one place I have dropped the ball. Yes, for sure.
Thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah, it can be it's kind of a vulnerable question. Sometimes I think, gosh, I don't want to ask this, but that for me personally, I guess I haven't really thought of that. And now I'm thinking, well, man, when my kids go to college, I need to find ways to pray for them just like that. So that's
and be intentional too. Like, so I remember on the phone, a couple of my girls all played college basketball, so a couple of them got my oldest got hurt. I remember just praying with her over the phone. I remember things that would happen and praying with them over the phone. But I'm saying, like, being intentional of, hey, come here, let's grab hands and let me pray over you. Not because something has happened or whatever, like that, which is fine, but even more intentional. Man, it's again, I just had it done. Just had my dad pray for me and just really be intentional about 2 weeks ago, and it's powerful. So I know that you as an adult male patriarch of the family, praying over your adult children, your teenage children, intentionally, not because just speaking blessings in their life. It's a powerful thing. So I encourage your audience to be active in that aspect of fatherhood, right? Be active in that aspect of fatherhood.
Okay, thank you. In that same vein, I sent you earlier this law of one of the laws of the intentional father, the law of vitamin E, overdose your children with encouragement.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm putting you on the spot here. When it comes to encouragement, maybe share just some personal insight on encouragement. And of course, if there's any research that shows, the encouraging words, anything there, please share that with us. How can we encourage our children, and what role does that play in their upbringing?
Well, yeah, I so we know that fathers and that children believe what fathers say matter in regards to encouragement, because if your father tells you can do something, you really believe you can do it. Whereas, oh, mom believe I can do anything, or mom said, so I think it comes different when dad says it, because when dad says it, you internalize that thing. Like, you really believe, because that's who we are. And so I think our children believe, and so believe when we say who they are, right? We tell them who they can be. And so um, as I think about encouraging my own daughter, so my youngest two daughters, my oldest kind of followed my footsteps in going into social sciences, a counselor. I'm a social worker. She's a counselor, which my youngest two went into STEM. So the middle one is a mechanical engineer. He's in graduate school, getting a master's in orthotics, prosthetics. He wants to do juvenile prosthetics. And the oldest one is an actuary. The middle one, the baby, I should say, is an actuary. And so I began to understand why there's an overrepresentation of women who are in STEM programs who have an active, involved dad. Why, when your father, if we look at science, technology, engineering, and math, and why there's an underrepresentation of women in those programs, we can look at how teachers and the school system react when boys get a B on a math test and a young lady gets a B on a math test. This is all in education literature, where that female teachers would tell the young lady, "Oh, you did good. That was good." But then she chastised the boy, so you could do better than that. And we look at these different kind of gatekeeping, or I should say gatekeep, but these different aspects of childhood for girls that prevent them from going into STEM, right? But then there's an overrepresentation of women who are in STEM careers who have a father, because their father has told them since early on, you can do better than that. You can do this. You can achieve this, or whatever, which goes against all the other negative impacts that they're getting in school, right? And so, and once I found that the youngest two were really gifted in math and things of that nature, I really started to push and encourage them and tell them that, yeah, you can do that. You can do these things. You can even be a Division I athlete and still major in mechanical engineering, which a lot of schools aren't really. That's difficult. That's difficult to try to be a Division I athlete and major in those difficult subjects. And so I think, again, that whole piece about encouraging, of course, I think we're truthful, right? But when our children find their niche, we're encouraging them, and this other piece, I'm glad I hadn't thought about this other thing too. So this last bit, I used to encourage my kids to fail every day. What did you fail? So for probably when they hit about third grade, all the way up to high school, well, probably maybe like late middle school, they knew when they came in, what did you fail at today? Because we can always talk about our triumph, but what did you fail at today? Because in failure, we have growth. And so, we would have conversations about, well, I didn't, I got this wrong on this test, or I didn't do this at practice, or whatever. But I just instilled in them, like, failure is fine. It's okay to fail. And so that was a common question I had with our Taco Tuesdays, or just our conversation throughout the day. What did you fail at today? And for them to be intentional about, I'm going to try. And so that right there instills confidence from a dad. Like, I failed. I can pick myself up. I tried. There's no failure in trying. And so I think that's gone a long way in how their worldview, how they perceive the world, that there's no failure because I tried.
Yeah. Love that, man. I need to hear that. Yeah, I think the fear of failure shuts people down all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to steal that question and start asking my kids that. I don't ask them that question. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What did you fail at today?
Yeah.
and let them be okay with, yeah, but I tried. And you say, hey, what would you do different? How would you attach that? How would you do that again? I study more. I'm gonna practice a little bit more before I try this move in a game, whatever. It's like, yeah, but hey, life, because we know life is full of failure, and it's
Yeah.
how we address it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Before we wrap up, any final golden nuggets, or anything that's just on your heart that you feel like dads out there just need to hear, need to know?
Yeah. So for men who listen to your podcast, just know that what you do matters, and not that we're doing this because we need a pat on the back, but sometimes it is good to get a pat on the back. And for women who stumble upon this podcast, who have sons and husbands and things of that nature, it's okay to say, "Hey, I really love what you're doing as a dad." I really, for mothers to say this to sons, "I really love what you're doing as a father," because um, we need to know, we need to hear that, we need to get the pat on the back. I need to be more intentional. I do it when I'll see a guy, with his kid, and I'll say something, especially if he's alone, like, hey man, I'm loving the dad vibe, man. Keep it up, And sometimes with his family, hey man, lovely family, lovely kids. Just because I remember having that done to me, and it's like, oh yeah, thank you. But the other piece is be intentional with your fathering um, in public, because again, men are highly unlikely to ask another man for advice, right?
Yeah.
Thank God for Google Maps, because y'all know, back in the day we wouldn't stop and ask nobody. Like, we go figure it out. And so I compare that to women sometime, where I see my wife talking to her sister or her friends about how to, do this, that, and the other, where we're not gonna call another man up like, hey man, how do I potty train this boy? This boy still peeing all over the floor and everything. Like, how I potty? We just not gonna add. We just gonna figure it out, And so I say that be intentional in fathering in public, um, because sometimes a lot of times we're modeling good behavior, and men are looking at us. And so, when my little ones would start to have, breakdowns as kids, and I would get down to the level in public and say, "Hey, don't act like that. You're okay. You're gonna be fine." And just, speak calmly to them, whatever. And I was intentional a little bit, because I know that it's some man somewhere where the kid's like, "Hey, I never thought about doing that." Like, he got down on one knee with this, you know, toddler being toddler having a fit. But hey, no, don't act like that. You're okay. We're gonna do so and so, so and so. And so yeah, that's a part of being purposeful, not just fathering your own children, but now you're influencing other men in your communities, other men in your families. Um, and again, being verbal to let guys know that what they're doing is meaningful. And begin, lastly, you open up a can of worms asking this question. Lastly, we have to think about even our sphere of influence, right? And begin to talk about fathering. Because a lot of times we talk about stuff that really matter. We talk about weather, sports, and politics. And not that they don't really matter, but sometimes we got to talk about how important fathering is. And sometimes how we struggle as men, as fathers, and our triumphs and failures as fathers. And um, yeah, begin to engage in conversation. And lastly, and I've begun to do this in my own extended family, we need to start holding men accountable. So, if I'm going to a family member's game and dad isn't there, I'm probably gonna ask him like, "Hey man, I've been to like two of your kids' games and you're not there. What's up with that?" You know. And sometimes we try to compensate for that stuff in our own families, but no, begin to have conversations with men about, hey, uh, you really need to be there for your child, regardless of what you and mom got going on. That doesn't impact your fathering at all. My next book is going to be, I just like you a lot, but we're going to raise this child together. To get through those co-parenting things. But no, yeah, intentional fathering, man. I'm just gonna piggyback on you again. Like, be purposeful as a father, everywhere. Because again, you might be that little nugget that a guy picks up on, like, oh man, I never thought about doing that with my kid, And so, and we know that men pick up on things from research that I've done, pick up on the influences of other men as fathers without that direct contact. It just because we model behavior.
Okay, that's good, man. Thank you so much for your generosity and sharing your
Sure thing.
experience
Appreciate
and wisdom with us. I think everyone's going to be able to have a couple takeaways from you. And
good. It's a blessing, man. Appreciate it.
All right. God bless.
God bless you. Thank you.